Karen arrived at my farm with 3 expensive lawyers. She claimed the HOA had the right to take control of my property. I listened quietly while they threatened me with paperwork. They had no idea who was standing in front of them. Karen pointed at my land and said, "This property belongs to the HOA." Her lawyers immediately backed up her ridiculous claim. I asked them one simple question: "Where's your deed?" Suddenly, nobody seemed quite as confident. The lawyers pulled out maps, contracts, and HOA documents. They insisted the paperwork gave them authority over my farm. But I noticed something important buried inside their documents. Their entire argument depended on one missing piece. I pulled out the original deed from my records. It clearly showed that my farm was never part of their HOA. Karen immediately demanded that I hand it over. Instead, I told her to read it herself. Karen started shouting that I was refusing to cooperate. Her lawyers threatened to take me to court immediately. I smiled because court was exactly where I wanted this dispute to go. They still didn't understand the mistake they had made. A few days later, Karen and her lawyers walked into court. They expected to see an ordinary property owner defending himself. Instead, the courtroom doors opened, and I walked in wearing my robe. The look on their faces was unforgettable. The 3 lawyers froze when they realized who I was. Karen stared at me as if she had suddenly forgotten how to speak. I calmly reviewed the case file in front of the entire courtroom. Then I asked her to explain why the HOA claimed ownership of my farm. Karen's confidence disappeared under a few simple questions. Her lawyers couldn't produce a valid deed or ownership transfer. Every document they presented collapsed under examination. Their entire case was falling apart in real time. I held up the original deed for everyone to see. The legal boundaries were unmistakable. My farm was privately owned and completely outside their HOA authority. Karen had brought 3 lawyers to steal land they never owned. The judge's ruling ended the HOA's claim over my farm. Karen and her 3 lawyers had nothing left to argue. They came expecting to take my property. Instead, they walked out knowing they had challenged the wrong man. The 3 lawyers stormed onto my farm, expecting me to surrender. Karen stood behind them, certain they had finally cornered me. But I quietly watched every one of them enter my home. None of them knew who was standing in front of them. Their lead attorney slammed the documents onto my table. He claimed the HOA had legal authority over my entire property. Karen smiled as if the farm already belonged to her. I simply asked him to read the final page. The attorney picked up the original deed and began reading. His confident expression slowly disappeared line by line. The document clearly established my ownership of the entire farm. Karen still had no idea why everyone had suddenly gone silent. Karen suddenly started shouting that the deed was meaningless. She demanded that her lawyers continue with the property seizure, but none of them moved another inch. They were beginning to understand the mistake they had made. Then the senior lawyer finally looked closely at what I was wearing. His eyes moved from the robe to my face. He suddenly realized this was not an ordinary homeowner confrontation. His entire attitude changed within seconds. One lawyer dropped his folder onto the floor. Another whispered that they needed to leave immediately. Karen demanded to know what they were afraid of. Nobody wanted to be the one to explain it to her. I finally told them exactly who they had come to threaten. The robe wasn't a costume or a courtroom prop. I was a federal judge assigned to the legal dispute, and their actions were now part of the case. Karen's face changed the moment she understood the truth. She had brought 3 lawyers to intimidate the very judge handling the dispute. Her confidence disappeared almost instantly. For the first time, she had absolutely nothing to say. The 3 lawyers began backing toward the door. Their entire plan had collapsed before they could take control of my land. I reminded them that every document they brought would be preserved as evidence. They knew the situation had just become much more serious. I stepped onto the porch and ordered everyone to remain where they were. The farm was mine, and the court would decide what happened next. Karen had arrived expecting to steal my property with paperwork. Instead, she had walked straight into the case against herself.